Hi guys, welcome back. Video number 2 on the planning section for our level 2 fitness instructor qualification. And just before we get cracking on the video, just to point out, before you're doing this is obviously video number 2, so you need to go back and do all the work on video 1 before you come to video 2, otherwise it's going to get a little bit confusing and you might not understand exactly where we're at. What you should have done when you've sort of watched unit 1 or watched video 1 and been through it all is filled in all of this section of the lap, which is called program card. So starting on page 26 and going all the way down, all the way through to, I think it's page number 30. There we go. So yeah, all the way down to page 30 should be filled in. I haven't filled in this bit here because this is where we put our stretches. So draw those in by hand, which is the way I prefer to do it. So that's why that section's blank. But everything else should be filled in, and you should know all of the exercises and teaching points that you're going to need to deliver your session. And just to recap very quickly, all these teaching points here should have 3 points in them as an absolute minimum, and every single box should have some information in it. If you've got a blank box and there's something missing from there, there's no writing in there or no information in there, it means that you've not got enough information in to be able to pass the unit. So make sure that all of those are filled in, and make sure you're happy with the session plan and the exercises that you've chosen. Make sure that we're hitting those bigger muscle groups first and then working through to the smaller ones. Now, let's get cracking with the next part of this video. So all this is filled in. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to come down to page 31, which is this one. And what you'll see is it says Session Plan CV. If we come down another page, Session Plan Resistance. We've then got Session Plan Free Weight, just here in bold. Right at the bottom, we've got Session Plan Body Weight. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the information from our program card. So our program card is all this information, up here. This is our program card. And essentially what our program card is a document that gives us an overview or a general map of what a session is going to look like. And then in this session planning section here, we're going to try and break it down even more and give even more detail so that when we come to deliver the session, we know exactly what we're doing and we know all of the alternatives that are available, and we're in a better position that we can fully support the needs of our client. And before you start this section, what is really, really helpful, in fact, I really probably wouldn't try and do this section without having a look at Unit 4, the Principles of Fitness, because if you haven't done that, then you might struggle with some of the knowledge that you'll need to complete parts of the information on here. So have a look at that if you need to. Have a read through the manual on Unit 4, Principles of Fitness. But, let's have a go. Let's have a look. And if you need any help, you can always get in touch. So what I've got here is the session plan for CV. And what I need to do here is I need to choose one cardiovascular exercise from my program card, and I'm going to break it down in even more detail. Alright, so back up here on your program card, you've got 3 CV exercises. You've got one here in the cool down, so I'm using the cross trainer here. See that CV equipment, so I'm using the cross trainer for the cool down. Keep coming up, keep coming through this. Come to this bit here, we've got our main CV component, and I've chosen to use the static bike, and we've also got our warm-up where I've chosen to use the rowing machine. Now if I come back down here, back down to my my session plan down here, so I can choose any of those 3, and so can you. Whichever one you choose doesn't matter, but it does need to be a cardiovascular machine, So if you've gone wrong in the top, if you've put a free weight exercise for your warm-up, obviously that's going to be wrong. It needs to be a CV exercise. So choose one of your CV exercises and break it down in more detail. So first things first, in here it's got timing / intensity, and all we're going to do is go back up here. I'm going to go back up to my bike section on the program overview. I'm going to have a look at the timings and intensity. So time, I'm going to be on the bike for 45 minutes and my target workload is 155 beats per minute. Okay, that's what I'm looking to achieve here. So it's 45 minutes on the treadmill with a workload of 155 beats per minute, and this information needs to match up when you come back down to the session plan. You can't have different information to the program card than what you've got in the session plan. So you need to make sure you're going up and you're checking the works. If it doesn't match up, then it's not an accurate reflection of the plan, and you've not done it correctly and you'll need to do it again. So 45 minutes at 155 beats per minute, and that's my timings and intensity. And some of you might have measured intensity differently, so you might have in there 50% of max heart rate, you might have 70% of max heart rate, you might have we're working at zone 3, 155 beats per minute. Whatever you've done at the top to measure the intensity, you need to bring down that information and put it into this section here on the left. Next one is exercise / muscle group. So the exercise / muscle group is the static bike, and I'm cycling, and then the muscles that are being used. So I'm using the heart and lungs, alright? It's a cardiovascular activity. It's going to use the heart and lungs, and that goes for all of them. And then I'm also going to be using my quads, hamstrings and calf muscles because it's cycling, okay? Predominantly I'm going to be using those muscles. If you've done something like the cross trainer or the rower, you're going to be using heart and lungs, and yeah, you're going to be using the legs, so the quads, the hamstrings, the calves, but there's also a lot of upper body activity as well. Particularly if you're doing a row, you're going to be engaging the muscles in the back. If you're doing a cross trainer, you've obviously got the pushing motion with the arms as well, and you need to take that into consideration and the muscles that might be used there. If you're unsure on the muscles that are being used for any particular exercise, have a look in the manual and you'll be able to find that information there. But please don't leave it as just heart and lungs, okay? You need to get those muscles in there as well. We've then got teaching points. So at the top, back in our session overview, we had 3 teaching points as a minimum. Here, we want to break it down in more detail. So go back, have a look at the manual and get in all of those teaching points, okay? So if you've chosen the bike, the static bike, in here, I want to have all the teaching points for the static bike, and also any other information that's going to be helpful for you to teach the session. So if you've got a particular way that you like to set up the bike and remember how to set up the bike, or you know that the client has a particular need, so put that in there. You know, if you know that the client is particularly stronger on their right hand side, then when they get onto the bike, you want to make sure that they're not left balancing on their left foot. Alright? It's a bit more complicated and it doesn't necessarily have to be in there, but if you're going out of your way to be the best trainer that you can, these little extra bits of detail are what are going to make you the best trainer that you can be. Alternatives. So in alternatives, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to look at, if we went into the gym and we've planned to use the bike, alright, and the bike's not available, what could we use instead? So I want to work the heart and lungs, and I want to try and get the legs involved as well. So my alternatives are going to be the cross trainer or the treadmill, because they work very, very similar muscle groups. You know, if I had planned to use the rowing machine and I went into the gym and it wasn't available, my alternative could be the cross trainer, because cross trainer involves heart and lungs. It also involves some of the upper body as well. Alright, if I was planning to use the recumbent bike, which is the bike where you're sitting down lower on the floor, maybe that's not available, so we'll use a static bike instead. Okay, and that's what we mean by alternatives. Another exercise in the gym that's going to engage those same target muscle groups and same it's going to hit the same areas of what our original plan had chosen to do. So I think all that so far is pretty straightforward. Where it starts to get a bit more complex is when we look at this adaptation section. And what we're doing in the adaptations is we're talking about how we're going to adapt the session for each of these specialist populations. And we've got 14 to 16 year old children, older adults, pre and postnatal clients, and we've also got disabled clients as well. And what we want to do is we want to talk about how we're going to adapt our session to meet their needs. So if we look at this 14 to 16 age range, you need to think about, you're doing a cardiovascular activity with 14 to 16 year olds. So what's going to happen to their body? Is it suitable for them to be using the same size machine as an adult? Okay? Are they going to be able to exercise for as long? How is their body different? Okay? And this is where your knowledge from the principles section is going to help you. So what I've put is, because this is a CV exercise, alright, to stop overheating, ensure regular water breaks and reduce the duration of the session. Alright, and the key things in here, I've put what the problem's going to be. So to stop overheating, and then I've put what I'm going to do to ensure that happens, okay? So what I wouldn't do, and what you can't do, is you can't write ensure regular water breaks and reduce duration of session. You have to put why you're doing that. So to stop overheating, ensure regular water breaks and reduce duration of session. And obviously the information that you're putting in these boxes needs to be relevant to that particular population. So if we look to older adults, so you get a little bit more understanding here. So I think we're working with an older adult, okay? And the problem is we're using a static bike. So older adults haven't got the greatest of mobility. It may be difficult for them to jump up and to sit on that bike saddle, which is a little bit higher. So I've put here to support getting onto and off the bike where appropriate to avoid trips and falls. Okay, so I know that they're going to have difficulty moving around. Once they're on the bike, we've got no problem, alright? There's no heavy impact going on, there's no big heavy weights being lifted, but getting them onto the bike could be an issue. So I've put to support them whilst getting on and off the bike to make sure there's no trips or no falls. This would be different entirely if I was using the treadmill. Yeah, if I'm using the treadmill with an older adult, as we know, their bones are quite weak. They don't stand up to impact in the same way as a younger person might. And in order for an older person to be safe in the gym, we don't want them doing repeated high impact activity. So if I had chosen the treadmill, what I might put in here is to avoid high impact on bones, use static bike instead of treadmill, okay? Because that's a safer alternative and a more suitable thing for an older adult to be doing. We've got pre and postnatal clients, and again, if you think about the bike and you think about the target here, pre and postnatal clients, what happens when you're sitting on the bike, the static bike, is you need to lean forward and curl, and that could put pressure on the abdomen area. And obviously if someone's pregnant, we don't want that. So what I've put is use recumbent bike to avoid pressure on abdomen area. And if anyone doesn't know what a recumbent bike is, and I mentioned a bit earlier in the presentation, but pop it in Google and have a look just so you know what they are. But they're essentially when you're nearly sitting on the floor, a little bit higher up, and your legs are out in front of you, and you pedal, rather than your legs being underneath you like on a normal bike, your legs are out in front of you. And once you see a picture, you'll understand straight away. But just Google recumbent bike if you don't understand. But what I've tried to do there is I don't want any pressure being on that abdomen area, but I still want to work a CV system, and I still want to work the legs a little bit. So I said use the recumbent bike, and that's how that works. What we've got here, bottom one, is probably the most difficult one. This is disabled clients, and whenever we do the disabled client section, you have to say what the disability is, and you can't use the same disability for every session plan. You can only use the one disability once. So you could do wheelchair user, it could be somebody who's blind, it could be someone who has multiple sclerosis, it could be someone with Down syndrome, it could be someone with maybe ADHD, it could be someone with spasticity, so particularly really tight muscles. Any of those, you can use them, and you can use all of them, but you can only use them once. And what I've done here is to give you guys an example. I've put wheelchair user, so I've made it really clear from the start that this is a wheelchair user we're dealing with, and we've put use the hand bike instead, so user can still work out effectively. So of course, if they're a wheelchair user, they're not no use of their legs, they're not going to be able to use a bike, so we're going to use the hand bike instead. And again, if you don't know what the hand bike is, it's a machine where you sort of like pedal with your hands. Pop it in Google if you're not sure, but that's what I'd be doing with a disabled client. And you know, we've looked at this session plan now, and I know this was already all completed and all filled in, and we're going to go down to the next one, and I'm going to fill it in live so you can see how we do it and get a greater idea for it. So have a look, and it says we're doing session plan resistance. So this isn't a free weights, all right, it's a resistance machine. So come back up to my program card, to the resistance machines section. Nearly there. Okay, so in here I've got 4 different activities, all right. I've got leg extension, the leg curl, the lat pull down, and the seated chest press. So what I'll do is I'm going to use the let's use the seated chest press. So I'm just going to grab this information now. I might need it, and then come back down the page, and we're doing the seated chest press, 4 sets, 12 reps. So come back down here to the session plan. So my timings and intensity, 4 sets, 12 reps. Okay. If you want to be really on top of the game, all right, which I know some of you do, you'd also put what weight you're going to be using on the machine. So you could put it as a percentage of their 1 rep max. So if the most they can lift in one single push is, I don't know, 60 kilograms, we could put we're using 70% of 1 rep max, which is let's say, for example, if it was 60, we'll say we're working at 42 kilograms. All right, you don't have to put that in, but if you're looking to do the best job that you can, then I would put that in there. But you don't have to. You could get away with just 4 sets, 12 reps. Next one is got our bit of a problem typing. Okay, here we go. So our next one is our exercise / muscle group. So it's a seated chest press. And then we're going to have to put underneath the muscles that we're going to be hitting. So we know it's going to be working our chest, but exactly which muscles? It's going to be the pectorals. And there's also a slight emphasis on triceps as well. We've then got our teaching points. So what I'd expect you guys to do is go into the manual, find every single teaching point and anything extra that you need to know. But what I've done just for the purpose of this video is I've just pasted down my teaching points from above. We've then got alternatives, okay? And this is slightly different to when we did it for the CV exercise. So I'm doing a gym session and I'm looking to hit the pectorals and the triceps, okay? So what else could I do in the gym that's going to hit those muscles? And the obvious thing is bench press. So that's doing a similar, very similar exercise, but with a free weight rather than using a machine. And if the bench press wasn't free, I could potentially look at doing a cable crossover. All right, that'd be another alternative exercise that's going to hit the same muscle group. So all you're trying to do really is get in there an exercise or some exercises that are going to hit these same muscle groups. I want to hit the chest and the triceps, and what I could put in there as well, if I didn't have any equipment at all, press ups would also be hitting the chest and triceps. So those are my, the nuts and bolts of it. I've got my intensity in there with the 1 rep max and the actual weight I'm going to be lifting. We've got the exercise and the muscle group in there, so pectorals and a little bit of triceps. I'm using the seated chest press, and again, remember, I've chosen that from the program card. It's not just I haven't just come down here and suddenly decided that I want to use the chest press. I've chosen it from the program card. I've then got all my teaching points in. I've got my alternatives, so other exercises in the gym that are going to hit the chest, the pectorals and the triceps. And now I'm going to come on and I'm going to look at doing my adaptations. And first things first, I'm looking at 14 to 16 year olds, and they're going to be using the chest press. Okay, so if you were to think about this, alright, and I think as I'm talking about it, it's probably already triggered off a few ideas for those of you who are probably a bit more keyed up and have maybe spent a bit more time in the gym. But 14 to 16 year old doing a free weight activity might ring a few alarm bells. Okay, that's free weights. This is a resistance machine, it's slightly different. However, think about these resistance machines, okay? They're not designed for children, they're designed for adults, okay? And if you've got a child who's maybe 4'5", reaching up for the levers and pushing them, they're not going to be engaging their chest, alright? They're going to be using all of their strength and you're going to be using the wrong muscle groups to try and move the machine. So what I would suggest here is use press ups instead of resistance machine. Remember, we have to put why we're doing it to make sure that the chest muscles are engaged. And then just as one final thing, I'd probably put resistance machines are not designed for children. Okay, so I've identified the problem, which is that children can't use these machines. They're too big for them, alright? And if they do try and use them, they're going to be using all sorts of the wrong muscles. And if you imagine something like a leg extension, the children's legs aren't going to be long enough to use it, and if they do try and use it, they could hurt their back, they could, anything could happen. So, remember, these machines are for older people. We've then got older adults, okay? And this is, I wouldn't say it's a poor example, but if I was going to do a chest activity with an older adult, there's absolutely no problem with me using the chest press. They're in a seated position, so they're nicely supported. Alright, there's not too much getting up and down, it's not going to be too intense for them, there's no high impact stuff going on, so I'm okay with that, alright? But what I really need to think about is the intensity of the session. And as we know, as people get older, they tend to lose strength in the muscles. So I'm probably going to reduce the weight that we're using, alright? Just to make sure that my older adult can fully engage and actively take part in the session, alright? And I'll put, because older adults tend to lose strength, I would reduce the intensity to 40% of 1 rep max. This will ensure This will ensure they can properly take part in the exercise. Okay. Pre and postnatal. So again, not really got any problem with a pre and postnatal using the chest press machine. They're not going to be they're going to be sitting down, so they're going to be well supported. They're not going to have to stand up for long periods of time, which we probably want to avoid. They're not doing anything that's going to heighten the blood pressure. They're not doing anything that's going to cause maybe a joint to slip out of place, because there's something called relaxin. There's sort of like a hormone that starts going through the female system during pregnancy, and that can make the joints a bit more flexible than they normally are. So people can easily sort of slip a joint or whatnot. So I'd probably, I don't think that's going to be an issue. My issue is going to be that I don't want to raise the blood pressure too much. I don't want to give them a really, really intense workout. So what I'm going to say is something like, important not to raise blood pressure. I will therefore reduce intensity to 50% of 1. Look, then got disabled clients. So let's say I'm going to work with someone who has had a stroke. If anyone's ever been in that unfortunate position to meet someone or to have family who's ever had a stroke, you know that it affects one half of the body. So what's important here is to work each side of the body independently. Just going to come down the page a bit so you can all see. Oh, too far. So to work each side of the body independently and encourage recovery from stroke. And yours is going to be totally different to this. So you might have chosen that you're using a shoulder press, for example. You might have chosen that you're using a leg press, a leg curl, pec fly, bicep curl machine. Whatever machine is in your program card, you can choose. But then when you come to do the adaptations, think about how those individual machines are different. So if it was, for example, I'm doing a shoulder press and I'm working with pre and postnatal, well, I don't want to be doing anything that's going to raise the blood pressure. And straight away, when you do an activity where you're lifting weight up above your head, that's going to raise your blood pressure straight away. So using the shoulder press with pre and postnatal clients, that's going to be a complete no-no straight away. Okay, so you'd have to choose a different activity in the gym. It's still going to work that chest, but we'd be working shoulders if we're doing shoulder press. So what can we do to work shoulders without increasing blood pressure? So you might look at doing something like a side raise or a front raise instead. And you don't have to put in, if you do put a completely different exercise in, or it doesn't have to be a different machine, you could use a free weight instead. Alright, so just think about that. Other examples you might be, we might have our disabled client might be blind. So whatever really you've got there, whatever machine you've chosen, it's going to be a case of guiding them into the machine and making sure it gets set up properly, because they're not going to be able to do that. Older adults and resistance machines, really you tend to be quite safe because they're seated. Majority of the machines are, and there's not going to be a tremendous amount of impact going on. It's not like running where there's a big impact going through the body, right? We tend to be okay with resistance machines and older people. We just need to make sure that looking at that intensity is going to be right for them. And then 14 to 16s, whatever machine you've got, really need to be thinking about, is that machine suitable for a young person to be using? Is it designed for them? What's going to happen if they do use it? And then what can we do to either adapt it or something else that's going to make sure the child can exercise safely. I'm going to go down. Alright, I'm going to put one more of these together. just so you've got a, your understanding really there in terms of filling these out. And this one is my one for free weights. So make sure you're putting them all on the right one, by the way. Don't do the free weights one on the CV one, because we'll get a bit lost. So let's come back up here. And let's grab one of my free weight exercises. So I've got, let's do a bench press, because I like the bench press. Grab this again. Okay, and come down the page. Back into here. So here's my teaching points straight away. Timings and intensity. So I think we were doing 12 reps, 4 sets. Let's just double check, because remember, all needs to match up. 4 sets, 12 reps, perfect. So 4 sets, 12 reps. Muscle groups, similar to my last one. 12 and triceps. Okay. And again, if you do want to jump in here, put in some extra information, you can do. So if I was going to put something like, we're doing 12 reps, so let's go 70% of 1 rep max, and that would equate to maybe 40 kilograms. Okay, and if you are going to do this, just be careful, because you are, in some ways, you are setting yourself up to fail, or giving yourself more chance of failing. If you put, we're doing 4 sets and we're doing 12 reps, and we're going to be using 95% of 1 rep max. Well, think about it, it's impossible for someone to do 12 reps with 95% of their 1 rep max. All they can do, they really try their hardest, and they can get 50 kilograms for 1 lift, okay? They're not going to then be able to do 12 reps on 45 kilograms, alright? It's going to be impossible for them. So just, be sensible at that if you are putting the extra information in. Got the muscle groups, same as before. Got my teaching points in, and again, make sure you go back to the manual and get all of the information in there. I've then got alternatives. So what else can I do in the gym that's going to engage pectorals and triceps? So could do seated chest press machine. Could do pec flies. Could do some press ups. Alright. Any of those alternatives that you think are going to engage the same muscle groups. And then we come to the adaptations again, alright? And 14 to 16 year olds using free weights. So I've got my 14 to 16 year old doing a bench press, okay? Is that going to be a sensible idea? Some people think yeah, some people think no. It's a little bit of a contentious subject, alright? Personally, I'd say it's okay for a 14 to 16 year old to be doing free weights, but if they were doing free weights, how would they need to be adapted? So let's imagine that they're not going to be very experienced, these 14 to 16 year olds using free weights. So what I'm going to do is I want to really make sure that they use the correct technique. I'm not really that bothered about the amount of weight they're engaging at this point. I just want them to use the correct technique and use the correct muscles. So what I'm going to put is that to ensure no damage to growth plates, because there is some studies saying that if young people do too much resistance activity, and in particular free weights, it can damage growth plates. So to ensure no damage to growth plates, reduce weight used and focus on technique development. That's that one. I've got my older adult. So we know that older adults use quite a lot of strength, and the thing is with the free weights, where they're different to the resistance machines, is that if you drop a free weight, so if you imagine you're doing a bench press and you're pushing that bar up above your chest, alright? If you drop it, or if you get stuck, it's going to hurt, alright? You're going to drop it and it's going to fall on your head. If you're using a chest press machine, you're still working the chest and the triceps, but if you get stuck, you can just let go of the machine and it'll go back, and you might make a bit of a clang and a bit of a bang, but you're a lot less likely to get hurt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put to ensure the client is safe and does not over exert themselves, use the seated chest press machine. Pre and postnatal clients. So here we're looking at people who are just about, or as we know, just had a baby, and what we don't want to do is we definitely do not want to be raising their blood pressure, as we said, and working really hard on that bench press and pushing that weight up above our heads is likely to do that. So what I'd say to do instead is I would say we could use a seated chest press. We've used that quite a lot. So what we could do is we could put a use the pec deck, still working our chest, as this ensures the client does not have to stand, because the last thing you want is someone standing up, alright, when they're pregnant for long periods of time. And this there we go. So use the pec deck instead. As this ensures my terrible typing, the client does not have to stand, and this machine is less likely to raise blood pressure. Then we've got disabled clients. So again, I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose another disability. So let's say if I choose MS, alright, multiple sclerosis. And then what I'm going to do, if I'm working with someone who's got multiple sclerosis, alright, my aim as a trainer is going to be to make sure they're healthy, alright? I'm not really particularly fussed. I'm not going to turn them into an elite athlete, yeah? That's a very specialist job for a specialist trainer with specialist qualifications. So, client has MS, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to ensure they can work out and be healthy, concentrate on developing technique, and making sure that your client is safe. Because the last thing you want, if you're working with someone with MS and they don't quite understand the activity, especially if they're being using free weights like this, then the last thing you want is for them to drop the bar on top of them. So I'd probably put use a spotter at all times. So you should really have a spotter there anyway if it's bench press, but some people who work out independently will go in and they'll train chest without a spotter if they're short on time, or they're training alone, or whatever it might be. But should really have a spotter there, but really need to emphasise that if we're working with someone with MS. And that is how I'd complete the free weight section. That really brings us to a conclusion. You'll be able to go through and, you know, you should by now be confident that you can complete this one on your own. This is the one for body weight, and you don't have to do anything with this. This is for me to fill in when you start doing some of the practical type activities. If you do get stuck, as always, please let me know. What I do need to say as one final point, please don't copy all of the work on here. If you do, unfortunately, it will get sent back to you. Of course, some of you might already have the bike, or you might already have the bench press or whatever, which is fine. You can still choose those, but if you are using those, you know, put in a different disability, put in a different way of adapting the session for an older person. All right, don't copy all of it, because I will have to I'll have to send it back to you. Hope it's been helpful. As always, let me know if I can be of more assistance, and I'll speak to you all again really soon.